Professor Catlyn Keenan has taught at Front Range Community College since 2001. She holds degrees in religious studies from Hendrix College, University of Colorado Boulder, and is finishing a PhD through Denver University and the Iliff School of Theology. Her area of interest includes gender and religion, religion and violence, and religion and popular culture. Her talk tonight concentrates the use of Christian symbolism in vampire fiction over the past 120 years. It is entitled Fangs and Crosses, What Vampires Tell Us About American Christianity. Join me in welcoming Professor Catlyn Keenan.
Now, let's try this again. Take two. So first of all, I want to thank the Longmont Public Library for sponsoring these great educational events, and also the Friends of the Longmont Library for these talks on Thursday nights. And thank you all for coming. That's awesome. It's a great turnout. Thank you so much. Before we get started, I have a disclaimer and a spoiler alert. First and foremost, the disclaimer. So tonight's presentation does contain some PG imagery. And so we are talking about monsters, and it's not G-rated. It's not R-rated, but it's not G-rated. So consider yourselves warned. I don't see any children in the audience. It should be good. Second of all, just so you know, I am going to completely and totally spoil the end, the very end, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you haven't seen it, well, you're now going to know how it ends. And not that a whole bunch of other really important cool stuff doesn't happen in the show, but you're going to see the second to last scene of the entire show. So consider yourselves warned on that point. I'm going to show a number of video clips. One of them is subtitled. And so if you need to stand up or move or whatever needs to happen, that's fine. Some of the slides that I'm going to show also have text. I'm going to actually read the text, and so you can sort of follow along if you want to. It's there more for your use, but you don't necessarily have to see the entire slide. So the first thing that I want to say is that there are a lot of different types of vampire fiction. And so Margot Adler, who's a correspondent for NPR, her newest work, her latest work, is actually on sort of different types of vampire fiction. And I think that she's come up with either 7 or 8 different genres of just vampire fiction. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to restrict my talk basically to vampire fiction where Christianity or Christian symbolism is very, very prominent. And so after the talk, if you want to talk to me about other types of vampire fiction, bring it on. But I'm going to focus my talk tonight on just sort of Christianity in vampire fiction. So in order to get started, let me just give you a little bit of background. I first became interested in the intersections between religion and popular culture while I was doing my master's work at CU Boulder. And so pretty much forever, I've always paid attention to how religion, religious people, religious symbolism are portrayed in different mediums of popular culture. And I'm also a horror movie buff. Like, if it's dark, scary, and goes bump in the night, bring it on. And so this in many ways is sort of a combination of those two interests in religion and then just sort of horror as a genre. So I actually ended up writing my master's thesis on this topic. And so this talk is a version of a talk that I gave in 2010 to the American Academy of Religion, and then I've updated it because, of course, there's new vampire fiction to consider. And so I've updated it somewhat for tonight's talk. The image that you're seeing right now is a painting featuring, let me start that sentence just entirely over. The image that you're seeing right now is a painting featuring the vampire Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And he is depicted as an angel. And you'll also notice this serpent over here that's coming down the side of the screen. So a lot of sort of biblical imagery here. And the tagline reads, "The angel who did not so much fall as saunter vaguely downward." This tagline is actually from the book Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, and is in reference to the demon figure Crowley from that work, if you read that book. It's about the coming of the Antichrist. And so I found this picture just doing sort of a Google image search for Spike, and I thought it was really, really interesting with the angel wings and the serpent, and then this sort of oblique reference to a Neil Gaiman, Terry Pratchett work. So I chose it to, and you know, it's cool. So I started out this way. So I am framing tonight's talk through the lens of both religious studies and popular culture studies. The study of popular culture basically asserts that every generation, every culture and subculture, every time and place, has certain means which are described as elements of a culture or system of behavior that may be considered to be passed from one individual to another by non-genetic means that manifest in the popular culture of that time. To put this in sort of different words, the argument is that the symbolisms and archetypes that are prevalent in popular culture have meaning and can tell us important things about a group of people living in that community. In this case, I will argue that vampires can offer insights into how Americans, or at the very least the ones who consume vampire fiction, view Christianity and other religions. But let's be honest, all Americans consume vampires. The Western world is in love with the vampire and has been since the age of the Victorians 120 years ago. Vampires appear in countless television shows, books, and movies. In fact, there have been more movies made about vampires than about any other single theme. There are over 200 movies dedicated to Dracula alone. So what is up with that? A vampire teaches our children to count on Sesame Street and fills our stomachs with chocolatey sweetness. Of all of the literary monsters that have prowled our fantasies, the vampire is the most ubiquitous. I like that one. And I could go on and on and on. Most of these images are in fact from the last 15 to 20 years. A couple of them are a bit older than that. But this is just a sampling that I pulled together in about, about 2.5 minutes on Google image search. So, since the age of the Victorians, 150 years ago, vampires have represented the conflicted and paradoxical relationship Westerners have with cultural taboos. So what I want to introduce here is this idea of the vampire as a very particular archetype that represents or stands for certain things in our collective cultural consciousness. Fundamentally, the vampire is a paradox. It stands for disease and death, desire, the longing for eternal youth, sex, power, beauty, and danger. But even more fundamentally, vampires are everything we want to be and yet are not. They are everything we want, they do everything we want to do, but cannot. They are the archetype of our repressed desires. They're immortal. They can do anything. Morality, ethics do not apply in the same way when one is immortal. And so, in so many ways, what the vampire represents is each generation's desires and concerns. In some very real way, modern vampires are our struggle to be good. And it is a struggle that we often fail. We try to be good. We try to do the right thing, both as individuals, but also as a nation, as a country. We have all of this power as a country, as a first world country, all of this privilege. And we know, that in some way we're supposed to use it in an ethical way. But often we fail at that. This is the vampire Damon from the Vampire Diaries. And I'm going to show a quick clip here, hopefully it works, that is going to illustrate Damon's struggle to be good. This is where it gets PG-13.
Not that kind of lost. Metaphorically. Existentially.
Do you need help?
Well, yes, I do. Can you help me?
You're drunk.
No. Yeah, it's a little, maybe. No, please don't leave. I really do need help. Don't move.
I don't want any trouble.
Neither do I. That's all I got is trouble.
Why can't I move?
What's your name?
Jessica.
Jessica. I have a secret. I never said it out loud. I mean, what's the point? It's not gonna change anything. It's not gonna make me good. I mean, adopt a puppy. I can't be what other people want me to be. What she wants me to be. This is who I am, Jessica.
Are you gonna hurt me?
I'm not sure. Because you're an existential crisis. Do I kill you? Do I not kill you?
Please don't.
But I have to, Jessica. Because I'm not human. And I miss it. I miss it more than anything in the world. That is my secret. That there's only so much hurting I can take.
Please don't.
You're free to go.
What do you think? So what does he say here? He says he wants to be human. That's what he wants more than anything else in the world, which of course raises the fundamental metaphysical question that is asked by philosophy. What does it mean to be human? He says that he is not. So what is human? He wants to be good, but he cannot. He is driven by his nature to feed, to even stalk, torture, and kill. And so vampires are our struggle to be good, of course, in a fairly extreme way. But we all face this internal struggle all the time. And there are these moments where we want to do the right thing, and that yet for whatever reason we do not. We are driven by some other desire. And so vampirism is this idea that there is something inside of us that is pulling us toward the evil, the bad, which of course is the fundamental question that Christianity also seeks to address. So, in addition, this next slide showed up on Facebook a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was very apropos. Right? So, even 30 years ago, vampires were scary. And so now everyone, of course, wants to date them. And Damon from the Vampire Diaries, by the way, is no different. He's one of the main characters of that show. In spite of all of his less than stellar decision-making skills, he's still beautiful and sexy and desirable, and everybody wants to date him. And so, In 1922, Nosferatu was released. It was the first vampire film to be released, and in fact, it was one of the first films ever to be released to the public. And so I want us to meditate on that for a second, too, that one of the very first movies to ever hit the big screen was a vampire film. So this is the vampire from Nosferatu, and what does he look like? Is he sexy? I don't know about you, but not so much. And in fact, he's been described as almost rodent-like, sort of very beast-like. So, of course, commentary on Twilight notwithstanding, I'll be happy to answer questions about that after the presentation if you're interested. This is Edward from Twilight, from the movie that was released in 2008, and so let's just look at that just for a moment. It took 86 years for that to turn into that. So, what is going on there? As both a scholar of religion and as an avid consumer of popular culture, I became interested in the vampire in the late 1990s after reading Dracula for the first time. In the book, which was published in 1897, the vampire can be harmed by the icons of Christianity, and yet the monster's acolyte Renfield, who is described by Stoker as a lunatic madman, says at one point that Dracula's, quote, blood is the life. He says that Dracula's blood is the life. This struck me as a direct reference to communion, understood by most Christians as the path to eternal life. For Renfield as well, the blood was eternal, but it did not offer salvation, but vampiric damnation, but such a sweet damnation, to have power, magic, to be irresistible, immune to disease and death. Sweet damnation indeed. In 1931, Dracula was released. It was the first movie by its title, to be followed by, oh gosh, at least 100 more. But in 1931, this is Bela Lugosi playing Dracula, and I picked this clip specifically, and watch and see what happens.
Come here. Come here. Your will is strong and healthy. More wolfbane, more effective than wolfbane, Count. Indeed.
So Van Helsing whips out a cross right here and shoves it up in Dracula's face, and the Count can't even stand to be in the same room with the icon of Christianity. So then, in 1992, Francis Ford Coppola released Bram Stoker's Dracula, which claims to be a direct and perfect retelling of the original book that was published in 1897. And so let's take a look and see what happens in that version of Dracula.
I who commanded this
hundreds of years before you.
Your armies were defeated. You tortured and detained thousands of people.
I was betrayed. Look what your God has done.
No, your woman's gone is over. You must pay me your price. Christ compels you.
He is now lying right.
No! Light!
What happened that time around? So he's a little bit difficult to understand, but this is what he says. Van Helsing thrusts the cross up, and this is the line he says. He says, "You think you can destroy me with your idols." And then Van Helsing comes back and says whatever he says, and he says, "Look what your God has done to me." And he lights the cross on fire with some sort of telekinetic glance. And so we go from a vampire, from Dracula, this is Dracula, from a Dracula who cannot be in the room with icons of Christianity to one who, while he is driven back by holy water, lights a cross on fire simply because he wants to. So this is what got me really interested. So you have the book, and then you have these two different versions of the film, and I started thinking, what is going on here? What is it about American culture and American audiences that is driving this change, this difference that occurs over a relatively short period of time in the grand scheme of things? So Van Helsing is the vampire slayer in the Dracula story, and he is not a priest, but he uses the consecrated icons of Christianity to do battle with the Count. And so let us take a few moments now to examine the direct connection between vampires and Christianity through history. What you're looking at right now is a movie poster for the film Priest, which is based on a series of graphic novels. The movie was released in 2011, and the vampire slayers are priests. They are consecrated by the church, and they wear, of course, these crosses that are tattooed across their faces. This is an image of Van Helsing from the Dracula film that we just saw a clip of, and he has a big cross. Well, he has some three severed heads too, but I'm more interested in the cross than the heads. So, let's back up a minute. The earliest known reference to vampires at all in the Western world arise during the 15th century. Inquisitors during the Inquisitions were often charged with slaying vampires, who were thought to be reanimated bodies who would rise from the grave to drink the blood of the living. But these creatures were more zombie-like than anything. They were kind of dumb, they were easily fooled, they were relatively easy to kill, they were kind of stupid, and they smelled bad, and they were just sort of gross. So in the 19th century, however, the vampire character shifts. And so the scholar Twitchell writes, "The English vampire by the end of the 18th century was not simply a ghost or wraith, but the devil's spirit which had possessed the body and trapped the soul of a dead sinner. In more precise terms, the vampire was the devil's avatar. For although the human body was literally dead, the entrapped soul lived eternally under the devil's control. The vampire's body had not always been under the control of the devil. In fact, it had once belonged to a perfectly normal human being who, by some sin, lost the protection of Christian guardianship, thereby allowing the devil admittance. This usually happened either because the sinner refused to obey religious law or was himself the victim of a vampire attack." So you get this idea that vampires are demons that enter the body, reanimate the body, and by the end of the 18th century that they actually trap the soul of the person who used to be in the body or whatever, and are holding on to it. They're holding it hostage in some way. And that the reason that that happens, or at least the primary reason that that happens, is because the person who's now dead committed some sin or was not a Christian. So non-Christians, by their very non-Christianness, could become vampires. So we start to see this direct connection between a Christian cosmology or understanding of the world and vampirism. Furthermore, Twitchell continues, the priest is understandably the logical choice in any vampire hunt, as he has both the knowledge of how evil operates and access to the armory of Christian icons. So if you want to banish a vampire, you just call up your local priest. He shows up with a bunch of crosses, some crucifixes, some holy water, well, and some stakes, which don't have any direct reference to Christianity, but you know, gotta stake them anyway, gotta kill them somehow. and your priest will show up and do the deed. But that didn't last. The Horror of Dracula, which is the first of a whole series of films that are collectively known as the Hammer films, were released. The first one, The Horror of Dracula, was released in 1958. In 1958, The Horror of Dracula premiered, resulting in a series of vampire films. In all of them, Van Helsing's character pays lip service to the supernatural by making a cross out of Dracula's elegant candlesticks and advancing on the vampire with this unconsecrated artifact. But this pseudo-cross only reinforces the potency of the sun. So what happens here is that Van Helsing whips up, he grabs what's closest to him, which happen to be these candlesticks. He makes a cross out of them. He advances on the vampire. The sun reflects off the candlesticks and kills the vampire. So it has nothing to do with the cross itself. It's just sort of, reflective. So to continue, Stoker's Van Helsing needed carefully consecrated weapons. Presumably nothing without clerical sanction would work against the vampire. But for the Hammer Dracula, symbol becomes body. He recoils from the mere shape of a cross. The symbol has become empty, divorced from the power of the institution of Christianity. Its power is based more on tradition than who wields it. And I'm sure we've probably all seen a film where somebody's like, get back. That has it's not consecrated. It means nothing. It's just the symbol itself. It's not like in order for it to be a consecrated cross, you would need a priest to come by and do a little thing. Can that stop? Thank you. So we've gotten up to a point where you pick up a cross and you throw it in a vampire's face and it works without the power of Christianity. But then, in 1976, everything changes. In 1976, Anne Rice published Interview with the Vampire. Over the course of the 1960s, between the Hammer film Draculas, vampires were portrayed in increasingly seductive ways, but they were always banished. They were always evil, and the good guys always won. But in Interview, the vampire's the protagonist. He's a sympathetic character, and the audience roots for him. We feel his pain and understand his ethical struggles as he seeks to be a good man in an existence that often results in the intentional taking of human life. And most importantly, he is entirely immune to the symbols of Christianity. Early in the book, we get this exchange. The interviewer asks, "Rosaries have crosses on them, don't they?" And the vampire replies, "Oh, the rumor about crosses." He laughed. "You refer to our being afraid of crosses?" The interviewer says, "Unable to look on them, I thought." And the vampire says, "Nonsense, my friend, sheer nonsense. I can look on anything I like. And I rather like looking on crucifixes in particular." The movie, Interview with the Vampire, was released in 1994 and pays a very intentional homage to Stoker's character Renfield. If you'll remember, said, "The blood is the life." The tagline of the movie poster says, "Drink from me and live forever." Vampires have become the source of communion, supplanting Jesus Christ. Now, if you want to have eternal life, all you need is a vampire. In religious studies, as well as in the study of literature, there is a character known as the hero. The hero is more than just the protagonist of a story. The hero is a particular type of protagonist, one who has a number of traits. They include, heroes are more than human. If we think about the Greek heroes, think of Achilles, you have to have a divine parent and a human parent. They are god-men, gods who have interbred with human beings. They are beautiful. If you read the Greek mythology, all of the heroes have this otherworldly beauty that actually indicates that they are heroes. That's one of the ways you tell a hero, is that they're pretty. Heroes are conflicted. They try to be good, but they don't always succeed. Sometimes heroes think that they're doing the right thing, when in fact they're doing entirely the wrong thing. And so heroes have this tension, this conflict that runs through their characters. Their endings are rarely happy. Heroes die badly, pretty much all the time. And heroes have a fatal flaw. So we think of Achilles' heel again to return to Achilles. But in addition to the hero, we have a particular type of hero that we're interested in religious studies when we look at popular culture, and that is the savior figure. We sometimes call this the Christ hero. All of the same characteristics as the hero, but with the added fact that they die to save the world. This, of course, is the famous one here in the United States. So what we have in popular culture is a series of pieces of fiction that emulate the story of Jesus. A hero figure who is conflicted, who is trying to do the right thing, who is struggling to bring righteousness to the world, who ultimately dies, who is resurrected to save the world. That's the hero, or the Christ figure, or the hero figure. You got it? Here are some other examples. So, Spider-Man doesn't die, but he does go through an intense crisis, at least so far in all of the movie portrayals of him, as well as in the original comic books. He goes through a crisis, and he returns different, changed, as does Batman, incidentally, especially in the Dark Knight trilogy. The other ones actually die, and so Gandalf is perhaps the best example of a hero figure who literally dies, and he falls in this awesome biblical, like, rain of fire that happens, and then he resurrects. Sorry, if nobody's seen Lord of the Rings, I just spoiled that too. Gandalf comes back. and this is just a selection. The list goes on and on and on. And so what's interesting here is that when these Christ figures die and are resurrected, they often return changed, different. There's something different about them. We are told in the gospel accounts of Jesus' resurrection that when he resurrected, he was changed enough that his disciples did not recognize him, that he was different in some sort of significant way. So what does that have to do with the vampire? In 1995, Anne Rice published the 5th of the Vampire Chronicles. It was entitled Mimnock the Devil. So Interview with the Vampire was the first one. This is the 5th in the series. So to give you a ridiculously summarized summary of the plot of this book, this is what happens. So the vampire Lestat is the protagonist of this book. And in the book, at the very beginning, he is approached by a being named Mimnock, who claims to know the quote-unquote truth about God. Furthermore, Mimnock eventually reveals that he is the devil, that he is Satan himself, and that he is on the verge of winning the war against God. So we have this idea of a cosmic battle between good and evil, and Mimnock's like, I'm almost there. I almost won it. Lestat, for the record, is very skeptical. Mimnock is actually seeking Lestat's help. And so over the course of the story, the reader learns that in a reversal of typical Christian understanding, it is actually Satan who is on the side of humanity, not God. So we have this reversal. In order to convince Lestat of the truth of what he is saying, Mimnock takes Lestat to hell. Rice's vampire Lestat thus becomes the very first vampire, at least to my knowledge, to descend into hell and be resurrected. And I draw your attention now to the Apostles' Creed. This is the version that was ratified by the Vatican in 2011, and there is a very specific line I want you to see. It's that one right there. He descended into hell, and on the 3rd day he rose again from the dead. The vampire Lestat descends into hell. 3 days later, he rises from the dead. Furthermore, when he rises from the dead, he brings with him Veronica's veil, the real one. It's a very, very powerful icon in Christian history. If you don't know what it is, ask me during the questions and I'll be happy to fill you in. But Lestat brings this back from hell, and it's such a powerful artifact that basically what happens is that the entire world becomes convinced of the truth of Christianity. Everybody starts mass converting, and the end of the world happens. The vampire Lestat starts the end of the world. Effectively, he is the second coming of Christ. Remember that vampire back that I showed you who fled from the mere mention of a cross in his face? Now we have one who's rising from the dead. This occurs in 1995 with the publication of Mimnock the Devil. So, where does that leave us? I don't know. Where does that leave us? So, in the last decade, since the turn of the millennium, the idea of vampire as Christ's savior has left America. It started here, but it has now left. This excerpt is from the South Korean film Thirst. This is the one that is subtitled. If you can't see the subtitles of what he says, I'll be happy to reiterate it after the clip. And if you need to stand up or whatever, feel free. Let me show it to you right now. Let me say one quick thing. So to set this up, The main vampire figure is a Catholic priest who gets sort of accidentally turned into a vampire. He didn't mean to be turned into a vampire, it happens by accident, but now he's a priest and a vampire.
연구소에 가서 알아봤습니다. 어쩌다 그 얘기가 나. 고칠 방법입니다. 햇빛을 맞지 않고 이것이 가고. 죽기 전에 한 번이라도 바다의 일표를 보십니다. 지금 신상적으로 하시는 거예요. 뱀파이어는 햇빛을 볼 수가 없어요. 밤바다로 좋습니다. 외로운 달만 불나방 하나 뱀파이어는 장진 눈 띄워주는 게
It says, be a
지정이야.
miracle worker, make the blind see.
비 좀 나눠주세요. 뱀파이어 비가 입도 안 했다며. 괜찮다니까. 이제 수사받고 싶다니에요. 저 특한 교황청에서 뭐라고 하건 그건 그쪽 문제고요.
In the gospel accounts, Jesus is credited with working all sorts of miracles, one of which is allowing the blind to see. And here we have a blind priest who is asking the vampire priest to give him vampire blood so that he can be the miracle worker and make the blind see. So, what does this mean? Some people have suggested that Americans crave a deeper and more nuanced religious experience than has been available in the past. Others argue that as those not religiously affiliated increase, vampires have begun to transgress the consecrated ground of Christianity. Either way, the accurately with which vampires shape themselves to personal and national moods is an adaptive trait that their apparent uniformity masks. Our vampires are the Freudian mirror self, reflecting ourselves back at us. Which brings us to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joss Whedon's Buffy the Vampire Slayer premiered on the WB and ran for 7 seasons. It stopped in 2002. It also had a spin-off show, Angel, which followed the dark vampiric hero of the first 3 seasons of Buffy, so vampire having his own show. And Angel hit the television waves 3 years after Buffy premiered and ran for 5 seasons, ending in 2003. It is in Buffy where the vampire as Christ figure is the most direct and explicit. Buffy, who we see here, begins the show as a 16-year-old girl who has been imbued with supernatural strength. She is a weapon designed to kill vampires, which are shown in a very sort of 1950s style demonic blood-drinking machines. Buffy battles vampires with crosses and holy water, just like, Van Helsing. However, while Buffy the Vampire Slayer had borrowed the use of crosses and holy water from standard horror movie mythology, it left their relationship to Christianity or any other official religion quite deliberately unanswered. The first time I watched Buffy, I was like, why is she using crosses? Is she a Christian? I'm confused. But then, in season 4, we get this encounter, and watch closely, it happens quick.
Jesus Christ is your personal savior. I met you, and then I just got really busy.
This is what the dialogue says. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal savior? And Buffy says, I meant to, and then I just got really busy. So this is an interesting point in the show where actually it's almost like fans were like, what is going on with this? Like, why is she using crosses? Like, what? I don't understand. And so this is almost a nod to that, without really answering the question. Buffy hasn't had sort of the being saved by Jesus experience, but she still will pick up a cross in a heartbeat if she's being faced with a vampire. Also in season 4, we get this scene.
avoiding this place for so many years, and it's nothing. It's nuts. It's got pretty windows, pillars, lots of folks to eat. Where's the thing I'm so proud of? You know, Lord, you're supposed to be here. He gave us this address. Well, we'll just have to start killing off his people. Let's see if he shows up.
Now we have a vampire feeding in a church. Religion has begun to lose its power. Vampires are resurrecting from hell to start the end of days. They are transgressing the sacred space of churches. They are wearing crucifixes. The power of Christianity is dead, at least in the vampire realm. The only thing left for them for them truly to become a savior figure, which brings us to the vampire spike. In the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 3 of the main characters die and are resurrected. But none of them do it in quite the way that Spike does. This character is first introduced in season 2 as the season 2 bad guy. And apparently the original plan was to have Buffy kill him off at the end of the season. But the fans responded so positively to this character that they actually wrote him in and made him a part of the show. And so by the end of season 4, he has become a recurring character. By season 5, he is fighting on Buffy's side. And by the end of season 6, he is actively struggling to overcome the vampiric demon within, a struggle that he ultimately wins. By season 7, he's a good guy, and he starts being shown in increasingly Christ-like ways. In this image, outstretched, weird symbols on his chest, some demon is trying to sacrifice him, but that's a long story. Wrapped around a cross. This is the same image from the back. So one of the interesting things about this image is that in the Buffyverse, vampires are burned by crosses, and so the smoke, the steam that's rising, it's rising from his burning flesh, and yet he's still wrapped around this cross as this act of atonement. Joss Whedon was asked directly in an interview if he intended for Spike to be a Christ figure, and he said, no, absolutely not. I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. Which brings us to the end of the series. This is the spoiler. So the last episode of the series is entitled Chosen, which is also kind of interesting. Buffy and her gang are in a battle to the death against hordes of vampires that are pouring out of the ground to try and take over the world. And Spike has been given a talisman that he's wearing around his neck. But no one in the show is really sure what it does. He's just sort of wearing it. He knows it's powerful. Nobody knows what it does. This is what it does.
Oh, bollocks. Feel it, Buffy. My soul. It's really there. Go on then.
Oh, you've done enough. It's still...
No, you beat them back. This is me to do the cleanup.
Come on!
Not a move, lad. It's fair to say, school's out for bloody summer. Gotta do this.
2002, there were a whole lot of Buffy fans going, no! But Spike dies at the very end, and he does it to save the world. That talisman is basically killing all of the vampires. It's reflecting sunlight through it, and it's killing all of the vampires, and he saves the world. Of course, he is a vampire, and so it kills him too. So then Buffy ended, I believe, in May, and then the following fall, Angel started, the final season of Angel. And so people who were watching both shows, the shows fit together, and so a lot of people were watching both shows. And so this was one of the best kept secrets ever, I think, in Hollywood. And so this is the very end of the very first episode of Angel season 5.
Deal. Whatever comes next.
There's the talisman. Angel and Spike don't like each other. It's a whole thing. He's resurrected. So he dies to save the world. 40 days later, he is resurrected. Over the course of Angel, we actually discover that he spent that 40 days in hell, as Jesus spent his time in hell, and he is resurrected basically as a savior hero. Not that he's any nicer or less sexy or anything like that, but he's the savior figure. He's a hero figure. So, ultimately, what we are left with is this idea that the vampire is the analog, not the enemy of Christ. If you Google vampire Christ, this is one of the images that comes up. I have no idea where it's from, but it's very fitting. So it's Jesus Christ vampire. And so ultimately, where does that leave us? What does it all mean? Well, I think that it means that today's consumer of vampire fiction, and indeed of any popular culture, is complex and nuanced. Lynn Schofield Clark, who works at DU, says this. She says, today's young people do not come to notions of religion with an empty slate. Religion is not seen by them as an unquestioned good. The implication is a far more relativistic and tentative approach to religion, particularly of the organized institutional kind. Religion might be used by some for good, but religion's power can also be marshaled in ways that the good guys never intended. You actually see this several times throughout both Buffy and Angel, where supposedly religious people are really bad people, really bad, really bad guys. One of the final bad guys in the last season of Buffy is a priest who is really quite scary. And then a more recent example of this actually comes to us from True Blood. This is Jason Stackhouse from True Blood. And there is a Christian church that is portrayed in very sort of evangelical ways in the show, and they're bad people. And Jason initially joins up with them and has this whole like being saved experience, and then actually realizes that he's actually on the wrong side, and he joins back up with the vampires. Although I'm sort of convinced that the only reason he did that is so he could have hot vampire sex, but at any rate. So religion has ceased to be this sort of always on the side for good. It's much more complex now. And so ultimately, I guess I could theorize at length about what all of this means, but it does seem to me that what's going on in vampire fiction is very indicative of certain themes that are going on in popular culture. That's what I would say about that. If you're interested in reading the entire paper upon which this is based, you can find it on my website at catlynkeenan.com. And with that, thank you for your time.